Good evening and welcome to EduView on the EdReach Network with show number 28 in our second season. We always feature a panel of experts with a purpose to professionally and critically discuss and assess the current trends and topics in education and technology. Tonight, following our popular discussion 2 weeks ago on assessment in the 21st century, we promise to continue the conversation and focus on classroom assessments, so that is exactly what we're going to do.
Before we start, we want to remind you that you can find EduView on YouTube, iTunes, and the EdReach Network, where all our shows are available. We'd love to be more frequent presence in your ear, especially if you can't make our live shows.
EduView loves our back channels on Google Plus and Twitter at #EduView. Please send your questions or comments to us. All the panelists are using the back channels and the Q&A feature on the Google Plus event page.
Now, we don't have a new guest on tonight, but we have the return of one of our regular, amazing guest panelists, Rodney Turner. He was with us in our last assessment show and appropriately is returning for this show. So, Rodney, for just one more time, let's remind our viewers where to find you, who you are, and what you do.
Hi, folks. Just by the way, that's a really cool picture, Kat, that you have pulsing there.
I know. I need to let people know I'm in the middle of a bunch of paper writing, and that equivalates. Can you?
Brand new word just for you, Kat.
She's going to use it in our papers.
Doctoral paper writing means you don't see me.
And you say words like equivalate.
Exactly. Moving on. Rodney, please talk about yourself.
Sure. I'm Rodney Turner. I'm a technology integration specialist in Phoenix, Arizona. And you can find me on Twitter at TechieTurner. And I'm not necessarily, well, I am in Facebook, but I don't give that out. But anyway, I love what I do. I work with a lot of different teachers. And it's really great.
I'm glad it's great.
It's really great.
Who am I and what I do and where to find it? Yeah, that's what I told you.
You got it. You go.
Following the rules. Good job.
All right, so hot topics. I have one I can start with. No one actually wrote them on the guiding script. I think we're just going to go by the seat of our pants here. Okay, so last week, or was it 2 weeks ago, at some point in my mess of final exams and grading on top of all this paper writing, the Google Certified Teacher from Chicago 2013, the people that I went with, held a tweet chat. I'm not very eloquent tonight. We're getting over this. Had a tweet chat on discussing Google. Let's see, and any ambiguity. And I can't speak. Any issues with data privacy and feasible solutions for schools using Google Apps in education. I made a story file that I'm going to tweet out here in a second. Ironically, a week and a half later, Google issues a blog entitled "Protecting Students with Google Apps for Education," in which they finally addressed the issue directly regarding, data mining for ads in Google Apps, and it does not exist. And they talk about all that kind of stuff. I'm going to tweet both those links, so anybody who is worried about Gaffey can now feel much more assured that they're in a safe environment.
Score. That's it. All right. Well, I'll go next. Hey, it's Teacher Appreciation Month.
Yay!
Thank you, teachers. Thank you for all you do. Thank you from EduView. Thank you. And
you are very welcome. Okay, now.
Yes. Yes. And so, yes, it's Teacher Appreciation Week. Don't forget that the hashtag #ThankATeacher is a way for you to, whether it's a blog, a 140-character post, something on Facebook, tag it with "Thank a Teacher," even if, and yes, you should do that. And then in addition to doing that, go and look at all the other really great things that are out there on that hashtag. It's going to give you a lot of warm fuzzies, and we all can use a little warm fuzzies in May. So go check out that "Thank a Teacher" hashtag for sure. It's going to give you a great opportunity to maybe thank colleagues or a teacher of yours. But share your "Thank a Teacher" story, write your own, and just check that out.
And you can get this fancy, and it's coming at you iPhone style, "Thank a Teacher" background to put your pictures on at ed.gov. I saw it on Twitter last week.
Fancy.
That is awesome.
Okay, so I have to ask, is there an Android app for that?
It's just a picture. I just downloaded the picture, so now I have to layer some pictures on top of that. So I could do that
Gotcha.
with Pixtex or something like that.
Wait a minute,
Yeah.
sure,
I had to
it's
say, in this EduView, Android outnumbers iOS.
agnostic.
Oh.
What?
Rodney. Rodney's shocked.
Power to the people.
Yeah.
Where's my girl Stacia when I need her?
I know you need Stacia to help you.
Ew.
Really?
Stacia's my Mac.
Just because we use it doesn't mean that's the only thing we use. Okay?
That's
so we're
true.
all agnostics,
We are.
device agnostic.
In fact, that can be my second on topic. I'd kind of forgotten about it because, again, if that's not like immediately on my calendar, I forget about it. I am actually going to be presenting a workshop on iPads at the iSummit in
Wow.
June. So I'm doing a half-day workshop. I'm really excited about that. It's going to be very much probably different than any iPad session you've ever gone to because I'm so sick of presenting about iPads that I refuse to do it in a way in which I've ever done it before. So
Good
it's
job.
going to be very much, you know, I think that the problem is people go to sessions with iPads and they're like, download this app and download this app and get this app because they have this programmed idea of what you're supposed to do with kids. And so my entire philosophy in this workshop is going to be bring your apps. And we're going to learn how to teach in a
Ooh.
class where you don't control what apps are being used. You're only worried about what you're teaching and what assessment practices you want, and however they get there, by golly works. And so it's going to be a great workshop of just
Brilliant.
of this come and learn how this works. Let's make this happen for a few hours. So I'm
I
excited.
mean, that's so brilliant. And I think that is tapping into something that stresses teachers out probably more than any one thing, is they've got this device, and now what do? You know, and they think that they've got to have all these great apps. I think that's brilliant. That sounds awesome. Good job.
Yeah. We just got to let go of the control. It's not about what the kids use to make the finished product. It's about have a rubric, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll talk about that tonight, right?
Actually, yes, we are. I was about to say, hey, that's coming up.
Great lead-in.
I have a hot topic.
Yay, Kate, share.
Well, it's probably something that we've talked about before, that we've tweeted out before, but since this is an assessment show, GradeCam is a wonderful website and, okay, Rodney, why are you laughing?
No, go ahead.
Anyway.
I'll tell you after.
And GradeCam is fantastic. It has everything that you need in order to scan the forms and just do quick on-the-fly assessments. So I'll tweet that out and be sure and check it out. I actually I went to an elementary school today and worked with 5th graders to do career day. And they had asked me to come in kind of from a woman's technology position plus, you know, since I work for the district and all this good stuff. So I had such a great day working with those 5th grade students, and it reminded me of why I do what I do. You know, that those kids are why I'm doing this. So just that's not a hot topic necessarily, but that was my happy for the day, was working with the kids and then the teachers too, of course. So. And
Okay, well, I'm going to jump in there with a hot topic. I'm very excited that my kindergarten teachers are actually doing a, not BYOT, but a device thing tomorrow. I'm going to give my shout out device thing. For lack of a better lesson with some devices. They're going to, I'm worse than Kat. I can't talk.
She's sharing.
Let's start
Let's
again.
share with you, Amy.
I go around once a week and I say, hey, you guys, what do you have coming up? What are we doing? How can I support you? And so they said, hey, well, we've got insects coming up. I'm like, oh, insects, that's great. I'm like, I think, and I was talking to the kindergarten teacher, I'm like, you can do this thing with QR codes. And I'm like, but you know what? I think there's this girl who, she's already done it. And at the West Georgia STEM conference, I went to a presentation by this kindergarten teacher. Her name is Mary Ameson. I'm going to butcher that, and I'm going to look it up in a second. But she's in Coweta County, and she has just put together a whole bunch of activities with QR codes on Teachers Pay Teachers, and I think that it is it's a really good introductory activity for my kindergarten teachers to get their feet wet. They don't have to create it themselves. It's made. They're going to go in and use devices, use QR codes, think about how they can then go on and do this for themselves. And so I'm really excited for them to jump in and get their feet wet tomorrow. That's my hot topic.
Awesome.
That's
All
really
right.
good.
Rodney, do you have anything you'd like to share with us?
Well, I have several things, but I'm going to go ahead and go one at a time. I'm going to go back to Kate. Kate, you asked me why was I laughing. It's because GradeChem is embedded as one of the plugins for an assessment piece that our district just adopted.
Oh.
You scan it, and it goes directly into the computer. It's really neat. So I trained a lot of teachers of how to use that specifically, but also making sure that their questions were relevant and that they actually abided by the objectives that the teacher taught in the first place. So that was a little bit of eye-opening for them.
Yeah, they do. I think that's great, because, Rodney, you've got to remind them that your assessments need to match what you're actually teaching.
Right.
Yeah.
So technically, we do always teach to a test.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to throw that in. Last week, you were talking about, for me, let me back up. I can't talk. I'm getting rid of it now.
Coming off on everybody.
Yeah, you started something.
She did, and I'm going to go ahead and get rid of it now. You were talking about how you were working with 5th graders and talking about how you were with Career Day. Last week, one of the schools that I used to teach at, we had a STEM day, and so I taught electrical circuits, and it was really great because they actually got to see how it worked, but also gave them some ideas of where they occur in our world. And it just brought home to them a little bit of how a system that they talk about in school is actually everywhere, more than they even realize. So I only had an hour, and I had 5 different classes, and it was kind of interesting just to see the kids that I already had before in my class and see how much they actually retained in 3 or 4 years. That much. They didn't remember, but it's okay. They do remember it because I've done that before, but they didn't remember the content. But anyway, it was all good.
Very cool.
I'm a girl that doesn't remember the content. I remember the big picture. And I'm like, yeah, one time we studied, the Revolutionary War. There was a Tea Party or something.
Me too.
Ask me any details, and you've lost me.
So with that being the case, do you remember the teacher?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I remember all my teachers.
Wow, I can't.
The good and the bad.
What about the teachers that tested you?
Mm-hmm.
Nice segue.
I remember those teachers. I remember the teachers that gave me hard tests. Like the one, this was my senior year, but I had to draw the Mercator projection map by hand, freestyle. No looking at maps or looking at pictures. No templates. I had to learn all the little ins and outs of the whole world. And I know most of it still. Like I can do a pretty good flat map of the world.
Why was that important?
To understand all of the geographical features of the Earth and how they affect the economies and politics of the countries which they are part of.
Makes sense.
Makes sense.
So I remember the first time I did really well on a final exam. I was a freshman in high school. My second semester, I had Miss Hughes, was my history or social studies teacher, made a 97 on the final. She told me, and we were both so shocked that I actually made a 97. Final exams are very stressful, and everybody who's here right now understands how stressful final exams are for both teachers and the students. Yes. My AP kids are taking their AP exam tomorrow, y'all.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm stressed out for them, and I'm happy I did not see them today. So I don't see my AP class on Mondays, and I was just like, maybe it's a good thing so that way they can have a little bit of downtime. But those poor kids, it's such high stress are these tests. And we talked about standardized tests last time, but I mean, final exams are classroom-based tests, and they can be very, very stressful as well.
And Kat, for someone who that may not, do AP exams or be in that realm, the AP exams determine whether or not they actually get college credit for that course, correct?
Correct. Well, and also it depends on what college they go to, because some colleges will only accept a 5, some colleges to 4, some colleges to 3. And of course, there's 2 and 1. There is theoretically a 0, but that's like you're an inanimate object and you didn't do anything. You just kind of showed up. That's a 0.
You threw up on the AP exam.
Basically. But the AP exam is very stressful, particularly for AP Spanish language. And what's so funny is they reinvent them, and this is the new version. So this is kind of a guinea pig class of kids, and they're all very stressed out about it. So we'll see how it goes. But in the meantime, my final exams are due tomorrow, and my school has asked. It's so funny comparing final exams from my time in public school excuse me, to my time in private, because in private they pushed having final exams that are illustrative of what they really learned beyond objective. They actually say don't do lots of objective, do something else as well. Meanwhile, in my former public school district, we had common assessments, and all of our final exams across Spanish 1 or Spanish 2 or whatever you were doing, they were all the same, and they were all objective. So, I mean, you should have seen the rush for the Scantron machine until, and I'll talk about that. I'll talk about my experience in a little bit, but very, very different experience. So, let me ask you guys, since we're talking about this, why is assessment important?
I feel like that was the question that started off our last show.
I think it was.
No, I think last time was, what is assessment?
Oh, yeah.
And we briefly talked about what it looked like back in our past, and now I want to know why it's important. Why should teachers even care about assessing? Why can't we just go in, and teach, and do all these activities and keep on going? Why do we have to assess?
I don't know. That's how I would like to do it.
Well, I think the reality is that it's like you set goals. There are goals you're shooting to get somewhere along the way, and it's you have to know whether you're making any progress toward those goals, and that's necessary. Otherwise, you're aimlessly wandering through curriculum and hoping that when June rolls around, everybody's real happy. So assessment is necessary because you have to set goals. You have to know whether or not you're reaching those goals. You have to troubleshoot if you're not reaching them and how to get there. So I don't think anyone would necessarily say assessment isn't necessary. It'd be hard to deliver any kind of instructional pattern without knowing if you're meeting your objectives along the way. It's a matter of how you deliver it that's key.
I agree, Jamie. And I think the whole idea behind formative assessment has been kind of overshadowed. We all focus on summative, what happens at the end, what have they learned at the end. And I just think that there's got to be more of a conversation and a collaboration about formative and those ongoing checks. We spend so much time looking at our technology director, our former technology director, always referenced it as the autopsy test scores. and what good does that do? That doesn't tell us anything. And if we have those formative assessments, like using some of these tools like GradeCam and things like that, then you have a better idea. You're taking kind of the temperature. You're getting a better idea of what your students are doing.
Right, and I would say, Kate, that we've always had pre-testing, but it's a matter of what do you do with your formative assessments? How do you use those formative assessments to steer your instruction? And you can't just have your plans in place or your groups in place before you go ahead and take that temperature and know which children need which aspects of the lesson.
And I think too, it's important that they see and they know that you have got to use a variety of methods for your formative assessment. I know I was guilty of it in the classroom. It's like, okay, multiple choice. Well, no, you've got to start blending that a little bit better and using some tools and guidelines to ensure that your assessments, whether they be formative or a summative assessment, match what it is that you're actually teaching and what it is that you want to measure. Rodney, what were you going to say? I cut you off. I'm sorry.
No problem. I think it's critical that we understand those different forms of formative assessments. I mean, just because it is a multiple choice doesn't mean that's what you have to use. I mean, you could have a thumbs up. I mean, that sounds crazy, but you could have a thumbs up as a formative. You understand? Yes. But you don't stop there. You thumbs up. If you have a thumbs up, that means that you're also ready to tell me what you think or why that is. Mm-hmm. So it's taking that time to say and to have the children explain their idea, their concept, their understanding, and their rationales. I also think that it's very important that teachers see it as a formative assessment, because see a formative assessment as an accurate way of assessing, because they are the little checkpoints. With my kids that I was working with on our STEM day, we talked about vocabulary, and I told them specifically about vocabulary. Part of my assessment, it's a formative assessment, was let's name some of the things you remember from electrical circuits. Had electrical circuits. Guess which class did the best of naming off vocabulary for electrical circuits? The fourth graders. Why? Because they had just done it a couple of months before. So they knew the vocabulary, but they also knew some of the ideas behind it. And then came some of the sixth graders and some of the seventh graders and eighth graders. But part of the thing that I wanted to simply say is that they are important in having many different forms. Just asking is a form. Whiteboards are a form. And I think, Amy, you talked about how are they going to document it? Well, you could have a little rubric that you hold in your hand, a piece of paper that says, yes, they understand, yes, they understand. It's quick and it's easy, and it gives you a quick overall picture of how to proceed from there. I think it's critical that we have to give those formative assessments.
I know I have done a good bit of reading on this too, and I was going to tweet out and share George Washington University, and they have partnered with MIT in their learning lab to talk about formative and summative assessments and collaborating, and they've got some really great ideas and rubrics and things like that. I'll tweet this out, but Rick Wormelli, I think I'm saying his name right. Anyway, they've got good kind of clips of him explaining it, and I think it does a really nice job. So I'll tweet that out.
Well, and I think also that, and I come from the elementary perspective, I think, Kate, you have some background in elementary as well. I think there's a very different philosophy behind what assessment, that formative assessment piece necessarily has to look like in elementary school. And I say that in that when I started really getting into technology and using technology with my classroom, I abandoned the philosophy of homework. I said, this is ridiculous. I'm getting nothing from this. They're getting nothing from this. There has to be a better way. And so, I taught on a team, and we had team objectives, and they were sending home paper homework. And so I wanted my kids to stay in line with what their kids were doing, but I decided to take the questions that were on the worksheet they were going to send home and turn that into a discussion question on Edmodo. And so each week my kids would have discussion questions about whatever the worksheets were asking them to do. And instead of it being, find which of these figures are polygons, the discussion question would be, take a picture of a polygon you see in your environment in the next 5 days and post it to Edmodo. So I just took the concept and made it something that was more realistic and meaningful. Now, what I found was not every kid did that task. But on Friday, we would literally go through each of the discussion questions, and we would talk about the pictures that were there, the comments that were there. We went through everything, which, by the way, also taught digital citizenship, because they knew on Friday we were going to look at all of it. And the kids who had not done it, well, there was a pretty good chance they hadn't done it because they really didn't understand it.
Right.
And so, to me, that was enough of a message to say to me they don't get it. But the good news is they had 18 other examples of what polygons were.
Right.
And so if they weren't learning it from me, they were still learning from their classmates. And I'd have people say, well, that's unfair. You're just letting kids slide by. Well, no. I'm identifying the kids who don't understand it. They're getting to watch all week their peers answer the questions. And they're not sitting out at recess because they didn't understand it and they didn't do their homework. So, yes, my kids are playing when your kids are sitting. But my philosophy was simply that they weren't going to do the paper homework because they didn't understand it. They weren't going to do Edmodo because they didn't understand it. So how was I going to get them to understand it? Well, I was going to let them learn through what their peers were doing. That was enough of an assessment for me to say, I need to work a little more with those kids and make sure that that worked, that what they saw from their peers was effective for them. And I think sometimes that's the approach you have to take, and you have to step back a little bit from every kid has to have an assessment on every single thing that we do.
Now, I will talk about an assessment that I like. Not like giving it, not like spending my computer time on it, but I do like the reading assessments for the information that they give you, like Lexile-based tests, like we give the SRI here in Fayette County. Other places give the STAR reading test that goes along with an accelerated reader. Mm-hmm. And if there's others out there, I just don't know about them, but I know that those are the two biggies. And I really like talking with kids. I like to talk to kids about books. So, you know, we have a lot of third graders who have really high Lexiles because they understand a lot about the world and they've had some exposure. But then, you know, they're not growing a lot because, of course, once you get to this place, you're not growing a lot, and there's nothing grade level appropriate or grade level interest-wise on these kids' Lexiles. So I like to talk to them about, well, what could they be reading? And, you know, well, here's a book that might, oh, God, that was such a Georgia thing. That might fit into your interest, and it has some interesting vocabulary, which is going to help increase your Lexile, even if the book isn't technically your Lexile. One of my favorites for that is Lois Lowry's The Willoughbys. It has fantastic vocabulary. It's a 790 Lexile, which a lot of these kids are reading above, but it has such good vocabulary in it that it's going to help them, even if it's not, you know, technically, like within their specified range. That part kind of irks me because I don't want to limit kids to a specific range all the time. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, yeah. But I do like the reading test because then I get to have these conversations with kids about books.
Well, and I want to say, too, what Peggy George just tweeted out, which I think is so true. And she was saying that it's not only formative assessments are not only to help teachers know where to focus instruction, but it helps students to self-reflect. And I couldn't agree more. And I think that's something that, you know, we forget as educators, is to sit down and talk to the students, just like you said, Amy. And it makes them know you're building that relationship with finding out, you know, about them and them learning more and reflecting on what they need to change and do better.
Kids do not care how much you know until they know how much you care. And you hit it. You said it, Kate, that you have to make sure that you sit down and you work with them. Even though you may give them an assessment that will be terribly hard for them because they don't understand it or they didn't do the homework last night, you still will work with them so that way they can do their best. I had a question, Jamie. You mentioned that you did the they may be sitting, even though they didn't do their homework, they may be sitting. What did you do with those children that didn't do the homework, didn't do the Edmodo?
There was no consequence for not using Edmodo. It was, and this was a conversation that we had. I had one parent flat out tell me in using Edmodo that her child would not use Edmodo at home, period. And you know, I had big detailed conversations with my administrator about that, and you know, the agreement that we came to was that it wasn't a district policy at that time, and I'm not certain it even is today. I was the only teacher using it. I was the first teacher using it. I was doing things that no one else was doing. So as you might remember or know, that does not exactly make people always embrace your new direction. The kids that could come in and do it, and I let them use their morning work time. For if they wanted to come in, if they wanted to, and they had something to contribute, they had their morning work time that I gave them in lieu of, you know, whatever I had out for them to do that morning. And so the kids that could do it and had something to contribute, they would. But the whole purpose was there was no purpose in homework. It was useless. So to me, this was just this wasn't a homework. It wasn't my homework that just wasn't paper based. It was my way of seeing who's engaged, who understands, who gets it. So then that could translate to what I was going to do in class. but it wasn't, there was no consequence to them. I still had probably 90% of my kids who got on and did it. But the 10% that didn't, there was no consequence to them. It gave me a very good direction as to, did they not understand it? Were they not motivated? You know,
Right.
It gave me direction to go.
So it was an assessment.
Yes.
Well, and Kat's back with us, and she was going to
Yay.
share her assessment journey. So, Kat?
Sure. Thanks for letting me step away for a second. Just trying to handle everything over here and keep it all together. So, you know, I realized I was taking home at one point in my career, I had up to 120 students, and taking home all these papers to grade and grade and grade, and it was this endless, and this is before I had kids, and I already felt the burnout happening. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to be the statistic. There has to be a way to be around, to get me through the 5-year mark and to get me past the sheer amount of grading. And so I started, when I was at Charlottesville for the year, I started to put everything online, particularly because the kids liked they could see some of the results really fast. I used Kia, and I have been using Kia ever since then because you're able to input. They can still do like short answer kind of stuff, and that can be automatically graded. And then going through and grading things on Kia is so amazingly fast. And even like essay questions, things that production of some sort in the foreign language, it supports foreign language as well. It supports audio. They can do listening activities. They can do, and I'm not speaking necessarily, but there's images I can input. The assessments, summative assessments that I can create on Kia are just as good as assessments that I can do on paper. And the statistics that I get are fabulous if you're conducting any kind of action research, which I'm going to share something about that in a second. I also use Kia for lots of formative assessments. The kids can kind of get an idea of how they did, and I can go back and grade it, and they can log into their accounts and see as soon as I finish it. It takes me all of like 30, maybe 45 minutes with the same amount of kids, 120. I fly through it, as opposed to paper, which can take hours. So for years now, I've been putting all my assessment online. And other than Kia, I'm really big on formative assessment using a variety of tools, particularly Socrative. I think Socrative is possibly one of the best things ever created. When you're talking about device agnosticism, especially in districts where not everybody's going to have a device, they're able to share things really easily. You're able to get, you can download the Excel files really quickly. The kids can play games with the quiz and then actually take the quiz if you'd like. It's just, Socrative for me has been a great way to do exit tickets or, the do now kind of assessments to see where they were, what they remember from yesterday, or any kind of 10, 12 question formative assessment. So there are tons of tools out there that can support that. If you're not an exit ticket or a Socrative fan, there's a service called Exit Ticket that's very similar. There's a bunch of services that are very, very similar. So there's things out there that you can use to assess, and it makes everything just easy to grade, all online, completely paperless. I rarely go to a copy machine, rarely.
Amen.
So that's kind of my journey, and it really has helped particularly, we're talking about Thank a Teacher. We can thank teachers for all the grading that they do and all the planning that they do. It is so much more than a full-time job, just how much effort they have to put in to make sure they appropriately and effectively instruct children. Right. So if you take away at least one thing like that, not only is it beneficial to the teacher, but it's also beneficial to the students. So it's a win-win.
Can I throw something in?
Yes, of course.
Kate, you mentioned that you were looking at GradeCam. One of the things that our teachers have found is that in the use of GradeCam to go ahead and, sure, it's a bubble sheet and they can have a yes or no, or they can have a multiple choice, but they could use that as an exit ticket. They have it by the teacher's desk in a pile, have a basket underneath it, and then as they put in their answers or the questions, the answers or their scores automatically pop up. So that way the student can see what they did, also as an indicator of how well they did, and then let the teacher know, okay, some students were able to get this and some weren't able to get it on the way out, and then it automatically goes into, it's automatically recorded for them. So people have wondered, well, okay, I don't want to use all this paper, just as Kat said that she went paperless. They've taken the paper and they've laminated it. So it's just made it that much easier to get those things taken care of.
And formative assessment, quick quick summative and quick formative assessment that produces statistics is the first key in creating the practitioner, scholar, and the teachers in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
You want teachers to start using action research. Well, the first step, the easiest way to do that is by saying, okay, you want your kids are here, you want them to be here. Why don't you, do a pre-test, do a post-test, and in the middle, do interventions via formative assessment. And
Absolutely.
see where they are and adjust, and see where they are and adjust.
Are you talking about the scholar practitioner model, Kat?
Basically, yeah. Basically, especially for the especially just classroom teachers in general. And I mean, I've become a huge fan of action research. Since I started going paperless, I've done 2 big action research projects, and one I actually ended up presenting at a local college, and I'll tweet it out here so people can get an idea of what it looks like. But it means that it puts me in a position where I'm much more aware of how my students are doing. So I'm not just kind of floating around until there's a test and, oh my gosh, all my students failed the test. Why? I don't ask myself that question anymore.
So with that being the case, you have a test and you have a colleague who's in the same content area. Do you think they should have the same test?
See, now it's a tricky thing.
Great.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
That's great.
Well, because we have what's called common formative assessments. You have the same things that you want to have all of your teachers do and make sure that they are on the same page or their children are all on the same page. So, I mean, should there be common formative assessments or common summative? Huh?
Yeah, I do not do common and formative assessment because every teacher teaches differently, and depending on their classroom culture, formative assessments should be suited to the teacher's teaching style.
So you're summative?
So common summative assessments.
Coming from 9 years of experience in the classroom, I think it would actually be beneficial to have common summative assessments, particularly final examinations and midterms if you provide them. And that does not mean multiple choice. It can be something you can get together. Getting together with someone and building these, not only does it create a really good basis that you all know, okay, by this point we're all going to be here to make sure every kid gets the same education so that when they go in the next year, they're all prepared at the same level. But it's an excuse to collaborate. It's an excuse to make sure that perhaps that one person that kind of lags behind gets that little bit of extra help without being pointed out. I'm a big fan of common summative assessments, so I think that would be a good way to go. Now, it also can lead to lots of arguments, but that's just how it is.
There's a big movement now to get common formative assessments. You're aware of that, right?
Yes, and I am not a fan of that.
But isn't that a great way for your new teachers to get on board to say, okay, these are some of the things that you can do. Here's some tools.
Yes, but at the same time, I don't think that it should be standardized. Formative assessment should never be standardized. If I am in the middle of a class and I'm like, I'm not sure if they're getting it, I just want to pull something out of a hat, I can. I don't want to have to use things that are set up. It's just that's adding more work to the pile. Okay. Formative assessment does take a lot of work. Of course, you can make it easier for yourself, but to do it right, you want to do it frequently, and that is some work right there. I don't want to have to worry about incorporating somebody else's formative assessment into my class, depending. I just.
And if I'm the only teacher using technology-based media resources to derive my curriculum, and my counterparts on that grade level are using nothing but paperback, paper-based books and textbook resources, those formative assessments cannot in any way look the same. They simply can't, because the ability for me to be able to pull in deeper, richer curriculum through media resources that they can't pull in from a book that was published 7 years ago, there's just no way. If I am that person, and I've been that person that I was the only one teaching the way I was teaching. And then if you expected my children to take the same formative assessment that a class that only had the 7-year-old textbook and some worksheets to go along with, that's ludicrous in my opinion.
So essentially what you're saying then, I'm sorry, Amy or Kate? What's your takes?
They're like, we're just going to be real quiet.
Well, no,
can't let you out.
Don't let us off so easy. No, I'm looking at what Bobby Lewis at US A BBS. I don't know how, Bobby, I'm not sure what your Twitter handle, anyway. You look at those Twitter handles and you're like, am I supposed to check this off?
USA BBS.
USA BBS.
Or is it USAB?
I mean, Bobby Lewis. Okay, let me get back to the point here. But he said he uses online games, and he said that students completed code.org tasks, and then they took a screenshot, and that was their proof that they'd finished. You know, I mean, I think it kind of goes back to what Kat and Jamie have both said. You know, you've got to kind of give that teacher flexibility. I get really frustrated with teachers being told exactly what to do, as if we are not intelligent and we don't take ownership of what we do in our classrooms. I think there are problems, of course, in any profession with, you know, teachers or doctors or fill in the blank that shouldn't be in that particular profession anymore anyway. But in this instance, I agree. I mean, I agree totally with Kat. You should have choice. And I think having one tool that you love and use quite frequently, like Socrative, is a great solution. You know, I mean, I really do. And getting those little snapshots of what the kids are doing. And what you've said with GradeCam, Rodney, make this easy on yourself.
Right. Amy?
Oh, yes.
Hey, Amy.
I was responding. Multitasking is difficult for me. I'm like over here madly responding.
Sorry.
Anyway.
Common formative assessments.
Well, no. Because I'm too independent of a teacher to expect that I would ever be doing the same thing as everybody else. I think that's really, I mean, I hate having common curriculum, you know, all year long where every teacher is teaching the same thing at the same time, because it constrains me as a teacher. Like, I want to, you know, have some latitude to do it this way or do it that way, or mix things up, or, you know, oh, hey, we're going to be doing math and, you know, we're going to be studying genetics and science at the same time, so why don't we throw together some seeds? And, you know, just the ability, and they do this when they're doing their curriculum planning together. I know, and especially from teaching kindergarten, I had some great kindergarten colleagues that did this, of integrating their subject areas. But if I don't have those colleagues, I still want the freedom to do that on my own. So having the common formative assessment might not look the same in my classroom as it does in another classroom.
So what I hear each of you saying is that letting the teacher have the opportunity to delve in, to have the flexibility, the availability to create the assessments that they actually need in their classroom based upon their own style of teaching and at their own pace. Which I completely understand. Jamie, I'm with you right there. As far as common formative assessments, I didn't really do it, but I think to me, I've seen some of the pitfalls in that teachers get afraid of falling behind the rest of them. If I have this common assessment that I haven't been able to teach, and I know I haven't taught all the points in that, I can't necessarily give it to my kids, or I feel really bad about giving it to my kids because all the other teachers have already taught that, and I'm behind. So, you know, I guess where I'm coming from is that my district just is really pushing it because we have a lot of new teachers and they want that structure. They're begging for that structure. We have veteran teachers that are asking, well, give me some common formative assessments. With that said, I think that in order to reach the level that you ladies are talking about and that you've done in your classrooms, we have to provide proper how do I say this delicately? Forget it. Proper education of teachers to make sure that they can create meaningful assessments.
Okay, now wait. Here's something. I totally agree on assisting the teachers who need the help. But in doing this, you're putting the work on the teachers who already do this to teach the other teachers on how to do this.
No,
Somebody else should be leading this, not the teachers who already do this.
Right. I'm not saying that the teachers who already do it provide the training of the education.
Who's going to that?
You know what? I think that's
Non-existent professional learning. Ooh, sorry.
what I'll have to go back and hear that. I'm not going to ask you to say it again. I do want you to say it again, though.
Back up.
I said non-existent professional learning.
Okay.
At
You
least she said
know,
learning instead of development.
I
At
did.
least you did. This is true.
well,
Definitely.
you know, I think that is where it comes into play. Who has the best education? Who has the best qualifications to show what meaningful assessment looks like in the classroom?
Mhm.
Those that do it. I'm not asking you to have the veteran teachers go and do a professional learning seminar on how to make meaningful assessments. I think that is where our professional learning communities come into play.
That's
We
exactly
work
what I
with
was going to say.
we have those teachers that work together and say, hey, this is what we're going to do, and this is what it looks like. Really? Well, how does that look? And then they work together.
And can we have those instead of faculty meetings? Thank you.
That would be awesome. Faculty meetings should be on a blog or a wiki, somewhere where that is, never mind, rather than emails, which no one reads because they change. They change constantly. Well, anyway, we're talking about assessments, which is a form of assessment. Did you read your email today? I'm sorry. I'm going to get back on the topic. I guess that one of the things that I see with a lot of teachers today is that we need to provide the time. I have a lot of teachers say to me that, well, I didn't receive training on that.
Mhm.
Does that mean you can't do it? Well,
I have a graphic for this. Hold on.
Oh.
It's somewhere on my phone. Give me just a second.
so I think that, to me, unfortunately, to me that's almost a cop-out. I completely understand all of you have lives. All of us have lives. All of us have things that we need to do. But at the same time, we have to provide the things that are necessary to assess our kids so we know exactly where we need to go to provide meaningful instruction and meaningful assessment to them. Because if we don't have that time, then what are we really doing for our kids?
Mhm.
All right, I'm tweeting this out, this image, and I'll say what it says in a second. It
Okay.
says,
George is going to. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
this is Sean Junkins said this. I've yet to have a student tell me they can't use technology in class because they haven't had professional development on it. This exactly applies to the exact same thing.
Well, and you know what? I say that knowing that a lot of our teachers do not have the personal technology that we do. I say that knowing that we have I have a lot of teachers that aren't as interested in technology as I am. But with that said, you have tools in your classroom that you have the opportunity to train on and to provide that assessment. Number one, GradeCam. The majority of our teachers have a document camera in their classroom. They can use GradeCam. But what we lay up on them and our teachers is we have this assessment piece and we'll give you so many hours of training and then go for it. And that's it. And that's a disservice. That's a great disservice to our teachers. And I'm saying that to myself, just so you know. I'm saying that to myself. So it's something that I know that in this springtime, a time of reflection, that we have to go back and say, okay, how are we going to help our teachers to become better assessment makers, the better educators?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take over this entire time.
No.
No, you're fine. Hey, by the way, a big proponent of common formative assessment is Solution Tree, and I'm trying to access their stuff to read what they've published, and it's behind a paywall and a password. So forget that. I've tweeted out though one article I found, scholarly article, for those of you who want to read it, since I'm in that mindset. Now, here's my question to you about perhaps an easy way to get by with formative and common formative and summative assessments. Let's talk about rubrics. Could a rubric be a solution to common formative and summative assessments?
Okay, for formative assessment, I don't know that I want to spend all the time that a rubric takes. Like, for a formative assessment, I need the quick and dirty. Like, hello, snapshot, okay, this is kind of where we are. For general, this is our unit of study, this is where we are. Like, I need to move on from that. Rubrics do take time. They take thought. For summative assessment, yes, and that gives me the latitude to, you know, kind of put my own judgment into it, because I think that I've been trained to have good judgment. I think that I have. I mean, that's, you know, and maybe, you know, maybe I don't, and maybe it's subjective, but, you know, that was the whole purpose of getting an education, you know, getting a degree in teacher education, that I could look at things and, you know, say, oh, well, the student has learned X, Y, and Z. Not is it pretty, is it colored, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, can I tell that the student has this information? So that takes time. Really where I was going with that. So not performative, I don't, in my opinion.
And if I may, I'm going to slightly disagree. I think that we can use a rubric as a formative assessment, depending upon how we break up the entire process. If we have it in the little bits and pieces and chunks, then you can say, okay, we're at this point. Were you able to accomplish this piece? Yes or no? Did you do it or not?
I completely agree. Yeah, I completely agree. When I taught music technology, this is what occurred to me when I was teaching that, because I was mostly a project-based class. And I actually assigned checkpoints. And I said, by this point, I have this rubric I'm going to assess you. And that's when I was like, oh, it's formative assessment with the rubric. So, I mean, you have that possibility if you use project-based learning.
And if we're doing a skills-based, you know, assessment,
yes,
that, you know, if it's based on skills, and okay, at this point, and if we have all of our skills for the year mapped out like we do for kindergarten, you know, okay, can you count 10 blocks yet? Okay, well, at this point you can count 7. So we know that we still have to keep going with the next 3 blocks and moving along that way. I think that's a good way to use a rubric. You're not necessarily assigning a letter grade at that point. That's your formative and summative, really, assessment, because those are your skills that you're working towards.
So
I just found a book, y'all. I'm sorry to interrupt, Robin. I just found a book that, I kid you not, it says, How to Create and Use Rubrics for Formative Assessment and Grading. Oh, it's a Google book. I'm tweeting this.
Oh, cool.
Sorry, Rodney.
That's pretty cool.
So we've had lots of talking to going on. I haven't been checking Google Plus. I hope somebody has. But Peggy George has made some great comments, as has Bobby Lewis. You know, talking about Peggy has tweeted out a chart with examples for formative assessment. So many ways to do this, and so important. And Bobby's talking about how, you know, teachers need to remember that assessments can be fun for teachers. And
right.
I think a lot of them forget that. So I really appreciate their comments tonight.
You know, I think that's something that we miss a lot too, is that they can be fun.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I really enjoyed is just being able. I go back to my tornado, my weather piece that I love to do with 4th graders, and part of that is just simply giving them the opportunity to draw something like 30 seconds, and this is what it looks like, and like really quickly name the parts of this tornado. It's really scary, and just bring up different pictures and point to it, and they really get into it, and you still are able to figure out who knows what. It is a little bit more complicated because kids are shouting out, but you know who they are, and you hopefully by that time know their voices and can see their faces and able to move and to be able to work with them in that situation. So.
Wow. That's some good stuff tonight, y'all. We could talk about assessment for days. You know that, right?
No, I can't.
Well, we'd have enough to talk about assessment for days. If we really wanted to, we would have enough.
Yeah, and I think we are out of time. We only have a few more minutes left. And, you know, I think that so many good points have been made. And I know I was talking to a teacher today about this show because I was telling the 5th graders, I was joking with them and said, you know, do I look like a YouTuber? And they were like, no. And I said, well, I am. And anyway, so it was funny. I was talking to some of the teachers, and I was telling them, you know, that one of the missions and the passions that we have for the show is to help them and to share ideas and resources of things that we've known that are tried and true. So I think assessment is so relevant for today and something that teachers are struggling with. So I think that's been wonderful that we've been able to share so many resources.
And I'm seeing these resources that have been tweeted out. I'm going to definitely share them with my teachers, and with our PLCs that our district is also working with PLCs and trying to develop that mindset. Let's say it that way. Develop that mindset in our teachers to work together and to be collaborative. And I'm definitely going to share them with them. Have to.
Awesome. Well, next week we will be talking. No, you're fine.
I know
I can't see your face, so I'm like, what?
No, I'm totally like out of it. So here, I'll pick it up.
Okay, pick it up, sister.
Next week, we are welcoming back one of our favorite people, Dr. Christopher Kraft. He's coming back on the show not only to one-up David Jakes,
Oh, boy.
which I know he wants to, but also to talk about a new baby of his. He wants to talk about STEM. Now, what's interesting about Dr. Kraft right now is that he actually has been teaching for the past year or two in the middle school an Intro to STEM class. So it will be really interesting to hear his take. So we're going to break down STEM for you next week.
Ooh,
And
that'll
if you
be
haven't
fun.
watched, if you haven't seen our show, the first show
Wow.
with Chris, go watch that one because he really wants that one to have a lot of views. And then definitely don't miss this next one because he is absolutely a hoot. So you will learn so much from him.
Thanks again for joining us, and please continue the conversation. You will be able to watch this show soon on our EdReach Network channel and our YouTube channel, and you can listen to us by subscribing to our podcast on iTunes.
And make sure that you follow us at EduVue, EDUVUE, and make sure you follow the EdReach Network at EdReach. Make sure that you are back with us next Monday at 8:45 p.m. Good night, y'all.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Bye.